Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Virtual or In-Person Networking, Do We Need Skills for Both? By jobs.ac.uk, an international job board for careers in higher education, as well as, as well as a dedicated career advice source with resources, articles and webinars to support you on your career journey. We've brought together Paula Cavell, Andrew Unwin and me, Susan Sheen Watson, to discuss the topic and help us gain an insight into the importance of both virtual and in-person networking. I will now introduce myself and my fellow panellists. Again, hi, I'm Susan Sheen Watson. I've worked in the education sector for over 23 years. For the past 14 and a half years, I've worked within Newcastle University in various professional service roles, which have required me to network with a number of people. I'm a member of AHEP and I've been there since 2011. Over the last 6 years, I became an AHEP ambassador for Newcastle University, and I'm currently an AHEP Deputy Regional Network Coordinator for Yorkshire and the North East area. And Paula, I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Paula Cavell. I am a Network Engagement Manager for Tessient. Tessient are a management consultancy who specialise in change and transformation projects. My main role at Tessient is engagement manager. So I work with our associate community, which is a blend of deep dive industry experts who support us on a variety of projects. Aside from this, I'm a founding member of the Women in Change group. So Women in Change is a private members network, and we meet virtually and in person. And I suppose the objective of Women in Change is to come together as a community in a pursuit of purposeful and innovative futures for change and women leaders. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you very much. So my name's Andrew Unwin. I'm currently the graduate school manager in the School of Mathematics at the University of Edinburgh. I've worked in higher education since 2001 in a range of central roles, departmental roles, and at a collegiate university in student enrichment. I've been a member of what was the AUA, the Association of University Administrators, since 2001. Now a member of the Association of Higher Education Professionals, that's AHEP. And previously I was the Yorkshire and North East Network Coordinator, and on moving to Scotland took over the Scottish network role. Networking has been beneficial to me in my career right from the very start, when I went to an AUA conference and started talking to somebody about quality assurance and found out they did exactly the same role. It later enabled me to go on a trip to represent the AUA at a conference in Australia, and that led to me talking about networking and being involved in events like this. Thanks for welcoming us, Susan, and back to you.
Thank you, Andrew and Paula. We've prepared a list of topics and pre-selected questions from our audience submitted before the webinar. If you are watching live today and would like to ask us any questions, please click the Q&A button at the top of your screen at the right-hand side and enter your questions. There will be a chance at the end for any additional questions. The webinar is being recorded, just to let you know, and will be available later through a follow-up email. So, the topic: what is in-person and virtual networking? In today's webinar, we will discuss how different these are. Paula, would you like to introduce give an introduction to virtual networking?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so virtual networking, I suppose it is what it says it is. It's a platform for people to connect across all different, I suppose, technical capabilities, via it being laptop, smartphone, or what have you. And it just gives you some really good accessibility to events that you may not be able to go to in person. I put some notes together in terms of kind of the brief benefits of virtual networking. And again, that's accessibility, flexibility, scalability, and of course, an environmental impact. So in short, I suppose that's virtual networking. Andrew, I don't know if you've got a definition of in person?
Yes, thanks, Paula. So for me, in-person networking can be a range of activities. Sometimes they are dedicated events that are advertised as networking events, either within a conference program or a day of activities. Although I'd kind of extend that really to say that in-person networking is pretty much any event that you go to. It can be just a routine daily meeting. You can be meeting new people. You can be catching up with old contacts, friends or colleagues. And one of the things I think we'll go into more detail later is that having that open-mindedness and being aware of the possibility of having conversations with people. So it can take place in various different formats, whether it's, you know, those general events or meetings. And I think really one thing that's I'd highlight at events like that is it's not just about what you can get out of it. It's not just about something that you can go to and take away from. Often it's about what you can contribute. So there's a bit of giving and sharing rather than just kind of getting the most out of it for your own personal gain and not looking to contribute. And I think as you go through your career, that balance changes, that you can contribute more and share more with people rather than necessarily just getting things from events for your own development.
Do you think that in-person networking will fade into the background, Andrew?
I don't think so, and I hope not. I think that some of this will be personal, and I will touch on, and I think Paula will touch on some of the benefits in different respects. That some people will have preferences. Some people will actually prefer online networking. Some people will prefer in-person events. But I think as a group of people, we're sociable interactions normally, and actually I really hope it doesn't fade into the background. It may reduce because of various reasons that we'll talk about in terms of budgeting and accessibility, but I think that human connection, the ability to sometimes have richer conversations, sometimes those kind of interactions that you can have with people, it feels a little bit more natural when you're in the same room. There's less of that kind of pause and wait kind of thing. So I hope not. I hope not.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's a blend of both, and the increase of online virtual networking, I suppose COVID pushed that forward and made it more accessibility, and people had to forward think, okay, how can I connect with these people? How can I engage and still deliver this information and get what we need to get across? And whether that be a learning session or a job interview or any kind of situation where that wasn't originally an in-person, they've flipped it on its side and made it virtual and more engaging, and not kind of totally cut it off and continued where they wanted to go. So I think there's different, or whatever your objectives are, whether that be, what situation or what event, I think the flexibility of having it, okay, delivering it virtually or in person is imperative moving forward, and the blend of both, and just completely delivering and involving those kinds of services.
I know that during lockdown, I thought I would find it very difficult going virtual because I'm a very people person. But actually, I was fine. I was fine with it. And seeing people on Zoom just kept that connection with people as well. But
it's that continuous confidence building on both, isn't it? And I feel like people have got so confident in virtual networking that you can hide behind a screen that they forget about, now you get more kind of imposter syndrome, or can I attend this virtual event, in-person event, and what will I say, and what is it like to interact with people again? And it's just building both kind of skills.
Definitely. Why is it important currently to have the skills for both types of networking? Paula, sorry.
Oh, okay. I suppose it's different levels of communication and different types of communication, and being aware of that. Virtual event is obviously being present and thinking about, why am I here and what do I want to gain from this? And in person, it's, again, I'd say it's about research on both, and that again would fall into, why am I here? What am I attending for? And what are the next steps? Or whether that be virtual or in person. And I think that's what people need to be mindful of. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Andrew.
I mean, I think it's important to have the skills for both, because you don't always have a choice, particularly if you're trying to make contact with somebody. They might get back to you and go, oh, well, I'm on site Mondays and Tuesdays, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I work from home. So in that kind of working from home, hybrid, global world of working, you don't always have a choice in whether you can meet somebody in person or not. Mm-hmm. If they give you the opportunity, then you can maybe select one that fits your preferences or your needs at the time. I think it's important to have the skills for both, in terms of from an EDI angle, that some people will have preferences in terms of accessibility. One might be better for one person than another. In terms of sustainability, we're constantly being asked to look at the global impact of our business activities, of our personal activities, and so sometimes in-person networking's not always an option. We often have, in our regional networks and regional groupings, we have online meetings, because it's a lot easier to get everyone together in a room for an hour digitally than it is taking up half a day of travel time and out of the office time. And so people can really see the benefits of that in terms of reduced travel budgets. Whether we'll see an increase again in in-person events, we in the Northeast and Yorkshire, Susan and I and other colleagues organised the first regional event after the kind of COVID restriction had ended, and people were really excited to get back together again. And there's a lot of that. We all felt the kind of death by Zoom quiz on a Friday or Saturday evening with our friends and family. So I think it's important to have the skills for both, because you don't always have the choice. Sometimes you need to be able to do both, and it's really useful to have those different communication skills.
I think also one of the benefits, thinking about what you've just said as well, is the data. So a virtual online and networking event, you can really capture more insights and data of engagement, which is really hard to gather when you're in person, asking for feedback or what have you. But you can check with regards to data of your global, who's listening, who's switching off, who's signing up. So there's a lot of benefits of that data insight in terms of virtual, especially when you're considering hosting an event as well, on the flip side of not just attending but hosting.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know for myself, I've used the skills that I've gained through both in face-to-face and virtual networking in my private life. I do a lot of work outside, organising events for the Sport and Irish Water Spaniel Club around the country, creating events for gun dogs, etc. And this causes, obviously, the skills I've had to use to develop contacts with around the country. And when they've come in person, regardless of whether we're putting in-person or online event on, they still keep coming back. So we're actually being able to expand our reach across the country, making a larger networking group. So that's helped the skills that I've developed. That's helped me in most things.
Amazing.
I
think it does give you a wealth of confidence attending both.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've put on. Sorry, carry on, Paula. Sorry.
No. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that we put on first aid for dogs online, and grooming sessions online and stuff like that. Just and post training events online, but we also do it in person, and you have to have both the skills to do that.
And that again goes back to your outreach. So locally in person, but for those who can't attend, or for various reasons, having that, even whether it be recorded or live, you're still getting your outreach wider than what you would if you just hosted a singular in-person event.
Definitely, yes.
Yep.
So is virtual networking as effective as in-person networking? I know we've touched a little bit on it, but Paula, how do you think about that?
Oh, it's a tricky one. Because it depends what the outcome is and what you want to gain from it. So I would say virtually, if it was an event where you're considering a career move, or looking at new training or different areas, I'd say maybe possibly virtual, you could benefit the same gains from it. But then in person, if you want to build out your network, engage, look at various different stakeholders, maybe you want to build your business, or I would say get out there, meet people face to face. There's nothing warmer than actually meeting people real time, and for people to really get to know you or maybe get your points or vision across. Then I would say, if you want to build out your network, try as much as possible to get to these in-person events, and look locally. Just look locally. It's lots, people aren't just thinking about running events in the south now. I know, way back it probably all be like London focused, but we at Tessian are aware of this, and we're building out. We do events running in the Midlands. We've got a northern hub. We're continuously trying to make our outreach more accessible in person than just hosting it in one particular geographical area.
Andrew, have you anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Paula was saying, I think that effort that you go to for an in-person event can often come across as a greater commitment to certain activities. I mean, I think in one sense we forget that before Teams and Zoom and lockdown and working from home, tools like Skype and other networking tools existed. And so we did have these kind of online conversations, and particularly if you're working, as many of us do, in higher education internationally, you could arrange an online call. But I think there's I was on that trip that I mentioned to Australia representing the AUA. I also took the opportunity to visit some academic partners and colleagues in Australia. And, we could easily have arranged a Zoom call at any time. But actually, I think the commitment of saying, right, I'm in your country, I'm in your city, going and having a face-to-face meeting for an hour, it's different. I mean, I saw a video online recently, on some social media videos of kind of people joking about how, back in the day, used to, in working in marketing, they used to, fly to New York for a 2-hour meeting and fly back. And you've then got to look at that in terms of the balance of, what are you getting out of it, and what commitment is it showing? Is it as effective? As I said, maybe it depends on preference. Which one would you choose first? You don't always have that option. I'd maybe not answer the question by saying, is it as effective? I'd say it's that they're useful and complementary. They're almost, is it two sides of the same coin? That sometimes you have a quick call online, you can then follow up with a meeting, and vice versa. One comes before the other. There are certain things that are a lot easier to do online. You can share things a lot more easily now in terms of, documents and working together on things. Yep. It's a great way of sharing best practice, and both tools, both sort of formats, are a great way to kind of get to know your colleagues a bit more. We often in my team, we have an online call because we all work in different places at the start of the week, and it's always useful that we have kind of some chat beforehand, and then we move into the business part of it later. And I think one aspect of that then is looking at and things for people to consider on the call is the kind of intercultural dimensions that certainly within a UK context, often you'd maybe have a little bit of a chat before you kicked off with things, and different countries and different cultures will have different ways of approaching that. So they're different formats, and I think sometimes it's harder to pick up on some of those kind of little nuances when you're online. But I think then it's a skill that you've got in terms of kind of pausing and waiting, rather than kind of being able to kind of interact with each other as you can in person. So useful and complementary rather than ineffective or differently effective.
Totally agree.
And I mean, one useful thing about virtual networking is you can record the sessions. So if you're doing anything like that, you can then go back and have a look and think, oh, well, actually, I missed that note, if you were making notes or whatever. So I suppose that is more effective than in person, because you can't record, unless somebody records it for you there and then as well, I suppose.
Definitely. And when you're there and you're absorbing it in virtually, you know, and if it's recorded and if you're sharing that with a group and you want to reach out to one particular person or you want to connect with them, to break down that barrier, you can say, you know, we joined this session. What, you know, your input was really, you know, really aligned to my thought set. Maybe we could meet up for, you know, then you can turn it into an in-person. Maybe we can meet for coffee, or maybe we can take a step aside and host, you know, meet up for a Teams or a virtual coffee. So yeah, they have their benefits, and I think that they complement each other really well.
Yeah, the follow up is very useful, obviously, like you say. That's very, very useful. Also, so we'll move on to sort of cost. It's now a big thing to consider. Virtual is sometimes the only option. With that in mind, how can someone stand out over a video call or Teams call? What skills would they need, Paula?
Oh, it's a good question, because sometimes you can't interact on the virtual networking sessions, and it's a bit more of like sit back, listen, take notes, and then respond. So that way, you know, again, that recording, going back to that, listening back, who do you want to connect with? What were your objectives for coming to this event in the first place, and what do you want to get out of it? And you know, it's totally free to connect with someone via LinkedIn. The powers of LinkedIn are, you know, we've all been, well, I have made some great connections and met some amazing people via attending virtual events and then reconnecting with them via LinkedIn and using that as a platform. And just, I suppose, the contribution and of maybe even offering to present or host one yourself afterwards, because you feel like you do have some input or a different view or a different perspective on that event, and just building that out. You know, think about, why am I here? What do I want to gain for it? And what are my outcomes? And how can I integrate or move forward with this particular network?
Andrew, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, cost is something really important, and so the benefit of technology aside, the benefit of being able to just have a quick call with somebody rather than having to get a train or a plane or travel somewhere is crucial. But in terms of making it as an effective interaction, I think Paula sort of talked about there, that kind of what you're, you know, looking to get out of it, doing a bit of preparation if you're attending particularly a dedicated event, having a little bit of clarity, you know, what are you working on at the moment? Why are you at that event? Are you hoping to find people that are working in particular areas? Are you hoping to find somebody that you can work with on something? A little bit of focus. I think for online events, you yourself need to be focused. You know, make sure that you're actually paying attention, engaging with what's going on. It's very tempting. I think we've all found with online events that you're attending the event, you've got your inbox open, you've got your Word document, you've got everything else open, you've got your phone. I know it's also, you know, it's challenging sometimes for people working from home. You can't quite be as rigorous in that exclusion, but things like that, making sure that, you know, as we did before today, that your tech's set up, that your background's clear. And I think we've kind of touched on it, and it's really quite tricky, that kind of etiquette of online meetings. You know, if it's a big meeting, things like mute, you know, technology varies, that sometimes connections and cameras and stuff like that, but just trying to work with people, that it's a lot easier to interrupt somebody in an online meeting. Not doing it deliberately, it's a lot easier to kind of think somebody's finished when they haven't. Then it seems easier to pick up. Again, maybe it's me, maybe other people have got these skills that you can gather it when you're, you know, doing online. But sometimes I find it's a lot harder to kind of gather that interaction when it's your turn or somebody else's turn on an online event. So those are the kind of technical and sort of other things to be aware of. I mean, again, I think we've talked a little bit about the follow-up afterwards, and whether it's online or in person, sometimes you just don't get long enough with somebody. You've built an initial connection. There's some connection there, but you know, it can happen at in-person events. You know, there's not a lot of time between things at coffee breaks in sessions where you're like, oh, I'd really like to talk to you about that. And so
Yeah.
following afterwards, I've had talks with friends and colleagues about LinkedIn. I know we've mentioned it. It varies across sectors as to how prevalent it is, but it's really useful as a kind of a digital business card, and in the way that, you know, particularly, you know, keeping names and faces, and, you know, in the previous days when you got business cards and you had to try and remember the contact and the connection, actually putting all that information together can be really useful. And it's you know, online then means that you can follow up. If you meet somebody at an event, it's a lot easier to follow up afterwards, to kind of say, look, it was really good talking to you quickly, but can we do it again, without having to be back in the same place quite so much.
I mean, I know myself, I met Andrew a long time ago in an AHEP event, and we've made connections. I made connections where he was working, and we've stayed in touch for many years. I suppose, especially obviously he was the coordinator as well. So I thought that, you know, that sort of connection stays with you as well. Mentioning cost. Sorry, Paula.
I was just going to say a benefit again. Sorry, we're talking about costs and interview, like just thinking on the job seeker perspective and their vision. When I am looking at recruiting, obviously the first point is always a Teams and a virtual meeting. And I'm mindful that, you know, don't want to drag someone across half across the UK just for a 30 intro coffee catch up, and it's very informal. But what I have warmed to is when I have had that conversation, and a response to that was, it was great to meet you, you know, virtually. Next phase, and not me asking, but the job seeker asking, you know, shall we meet up for coffee? And I'm quite happy as a recruiter to go to wherever they may be, to meet with them in person. But I just feel that is really good, something to have in your toolkit if you are looking for that next role, or looking for, you know, somewhere on your career path or journey. To offer to meet in person is a very much a positive right now. If you can, and if you're capable to do so. Yeah,
of course. I mean, looking at costs in virtual for the Newcastle University during lockdown, we churned all of our vivas in, obviously on online ones, because it couldn't be in person, and we've tried to keep that up to keep the costs down for the university as well. But it started creeping up again, getting people from Canada and America and and that sort of thing. But where possible, we would try and do it virtually. So what activities do you both use networking skills for?
Paula, do you want to go first?
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't me, but...
Yeah, go on. You go, Andrew. Go on, I'll follow you on.
Okay. I suppose the short and snappy answer to that question is, what do we use them for? I think almost everything from personal to professional life. I mean, we've talked about job hunting, and obviously, you know, when you go into a new job, having developed networking skills is really important, because particularly if you change institutions or change sectors, you really need to have that, you know, it's really useful to have that confidence to be able to kind of reach out to somebody, to kind of go, I've got a question and I don't quite know the answer. You don't have that kind of established network. And, you know, I speak from personal experience, having changed, you know, I worked at Durham University for about 22 years. And so changing institutions after quite a lot, that long, having those skills of being able to connect with people is really useful. You know, we've talked about dedicated events for networking and things like, you know, the conferences for sort of professional bodies. They can be really useful for developing ideas. You know, we've had conversations at conference events where you kind of start talking about something, and the ability, you know, I've used those kind of networking skills where somebody said, oh, it'd be great to have an event on the cost of living. And you're like, okay, well, I know there's somebody at university of this, and there's somebody at that university, and I know somebody in that sector. And you can use those kind of skills to draw an event together. You can use it just in your day-to-day work. You can use it when you're supporting staff and students, particularly when you're kind of resolving complicated problems that involve maybe more than one office or group or agency, to kind of be that kind of hub that draws things together. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on well-being and resilience. So you can, you know, so we've all had that kind of bad day, and whether it's with a colleague or a friend, that actually being able to just sort of reach out and say, can we have a chat about this? It's a really useful skill to just be able to reach out to somebody in whatever format suits you best, to look after yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I suppose part of me, obviously, a huge part of my role is engagement and networking, whether that be virtually and me arranging that, or whether it's in person. But aside from that, starting these networking events via Tessiant, I then engaged with another networking group, which is Women in Change, hence why we all came together. And it's really interesting. There's numerous private networking groups out there. You just think, maybe I want to be a part of this or part of that. But it really does expand your passions and where you foresee yourself. And it's good to step aside sometimes from the workplace and what's happening there. But what do I want to gain outside that workplace, but can also connect back into it? And the Women in Change, it kind of falls into what I do, then also a passion for, being, supporting women going through transformation, change, whether that be in a personal perspective or in their career, across multiple industries. It's a really good, I suppose, soundboard on a personal and work perspective. And I think look at expanding your networking groups, whether that be private and not just keeping it streamlined into one area and one focus area. And like you said, the well-being, there's networking groups, for mindfulness, and there's just multiple platforms now. And I think it's just doing your research and finding the right ones for you. And again, that doesn't have to be restricted, because the virtual is a platform globally, so it's got multiple outreaches culturally. And that's me.
Thank you. So you've already mentioned LinkedIn. It's the biggest online networking tool used by millions of academics and professionals globally, helping them connect daily. I'm curious, Paul and Andrew, how often do you use this tool? Either one can start.
Daily.
Daily
for me. Daily for me. Part of my role is we work through referrals only. So I've got a huge network of various industry leading experts that I connect with on a daily basis, finding out what they're doing, what they're up to. So for me, it's a super useful tool. I attend webinars, whether at the moment I've got a huge interest in AI. So again, I use it as a learning tool. I try to learn something, whether it be twice weekly or bi-weekly, but just to go on and listen. And there's some great little, you can, if you're doing something and you want to listen in the background, LinkedIn is very useful in terms of career learning and accessibility. For me, I find it very beneficial. I know sometimes it's changing sometimes into more of a social media platform, but again, it's getting your personality across and it's getting your feelings across, because we're not robots. We all have a life, and that does connect to what we do in our work-life balance as well. So I find it super useful.
Andrew?
Yeah, I know we've talked on it, and I've kind of hinted that I've got mixed feelings about it. I think it can be incredibly useful. As I say, I like it for that kind of digital business card aspect of it, of being able to kind of cement a maybe an early connection. As Paula says, it's that. I mean, the notes I'd written for today, I'd written Facebook for work. That it's another social media platform. It's another platform. It's another online platform. Sometimes, many of us spend so long online doing things, connected in various things during the day, that, it's one of those kind of tools where you could spend a lot of time on it, and clearly, almost from the posts, some people do. I think it has its pros. I mean, I saw a post on another social media network today that I think with the French footballer getting injured in the World Cup game, and they said, "Oh, I can just see somebody posting a LinkedIn post about this," and lo and behold, there's a LinkedIn post from a recruiter saying that it just shows that you need the right team. And so, there's aspects of it that I think unfortunately kind of overshadow, some of the real strengths of something like that. And as Paula says, in certain industries, it's absolutely essential. It's a friend of mine, you can tell he works in marketing. It's your online shop front to the world in terms of your skill set, your experience. In terms of actually using it, I suppose I'd say, and I made the mistake when I gave a talk on networking once. I said, if you see me at the conference, please, come and say hello to me. And what I forgot to say was, please tell me that you were at my talk, and that's why you're saying hello, because it was a rather thing. And I think that's one of the other things about LinkedIn are those kind of cold connections that sometimes you get, that you need to have something. I think it needs to be used intelligently. I think some people use it in maybe a scattergun approach. So I'd use it, strategically and carefully. I kind of, I visit a lot. I post a little bit, but I kind of, keep an eye on it. It's nice to see how people are doing, but I think it's more useful as that kind of keeping in touch with people. And then if you are, getting back in touch again, you can at least find some information. It's back to that comment I made about preparing for events. Have a little bit about, if you're going to be having a conversation with somebody, try and find out some relevant contextual current information that you've got some sort of, try and establish some sort of link or something. So mixed feelings.
I totally agree. So why are you connecting with me? And it's like, if they do connect with you, thank you for connecting with me. The purpose of me connecting with you was because of XYZ, and can we further this conversation, and not just using it as a kind of job hunting recruiter toolkit, because I know that the disadvantages sometimes with LinkedIn, and they do post a lot of roles on there, is that the AI on it, if you click on it on the job itself, it shows that you're an applicant and not that you've actually applied for the role. And sometimes it could be quite off-putting if you're going for a role and you see it on LinkedIn and you say, oh my gosh, there's 1,540 people that applied for that role. Maybe not. That's not the case. It just means that someone's actually clicked on the job itself. So that's quite handy to know if you are on here today and looking for a new role. Thank you.
I personally, I don't use it as much. I use it to connect with people, obviously, who I've met at meetings or at events. I've used it to keep connected with people who I've worked with in the past who may have moved on to different roles. Excuse me. And I also, I've been contacted by job recruiters and saying that it's a job that fits my profile. And I look at the job sections as well, but I don't go on it as much. It's not something that I use all the time, but keep getting notifications popping up when I'm at work. So I think that there's a couple of questions that have come into the chat. If you don't mind us just being quick. There's somebody, I think it's, sorry if I pronounce this wrong, but I'm not very good at pronouncing names. I'm really sorry. Serene Segul has asked, as someone who hates working from home, isolated, and needs in-person interaction, how can I improve my virtual networking skills? Andrew or Paula?
I've got some initial thoughts. I'm happy to jump in while I can see Paula's thinking away there as well. I mean, I would start if one of my team or colleagues came to me and said, look, actually I really like the in-person stuff, but I find online hard. I'd kind of do that in a supportive environment. I think you'd maybe take it as, okay, well, what actually we'll have our conversations and our meetings on a Teams format for the time being, and work through things. So sorry, it's a rather scientific approach that you're keeping what's constant, what you're comfortable with, the work, and then just changing one element of it. So give somebody the opportunity. I think then from that you might say, well, actually, at the next team meeting or at the next opportunity, we'll give you an opportunity to present in that format and support people through it. I mean, I remember once I said at an appraisal, I don't mind public speaking, and the next thing I knew, I was at the front of the cathedral making the announcements before graduation. So I think I'd look at trying to help somebody in a supportive way. Susan, you talked about sort of different clubs and societies and groups. So again, maybe if you're comfortable in a particular environment with a particular group of people, try and develop this thing that you're finding more difficult in that kind of area or arena that you're comfortable in.
Sorry, Andrew, I'll have to cut you short there because we're actually running out of time. Can you quickly just give a couple of or a top tip to people before we go? Either of you.
Top tip from me is consider what your strengths and weaknesses are. So if you feel like you're stronger in the in-person, think about how you can develop that into being more virtual. And if it's more virtual, think about your strengths and how you can change and coming into in-person, and look at the accessibilities on both and where you want to view. So think about your visions. Why am I here? What am I doing it for? And what are my next steps? Not just attending every kind of virtual or in-person network event. Have a personal objective or outcome that you want to obtain.
Thank you. Andrew?
Excellent. Thank Paul has ticked off at least 2 of the ones that were on my list. So that's good that we're of like mine. I think one thing to be mindful of and not to be disheartened by is that not every connection that you make will flourish into something really rich and meaningful in the future. And sometimes, particularly at events, either online, in person, you can feel like there's a connection and actually things don't work out. But the thing that I'll finish with, and the thing that I've used when I've talked about networking, is what I found once, which is Inigo Montoya's Guide to Networking Success, and it's a little 4-part tip, and I'll read you the phrase and then I'll just quickly break it down. So it's hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Which comes across as quite intense, but actually, if you look at that four steps to networking success, it's a polite greeting, give your name, establish a relevant personal link, and then manage expectations. So you can use something like that when you're meeting people, just to introduce yourself, establish some kind of connection, and then set out kind of what you hope to get or be able to give from that conversation.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody. And I think that's been really interesting. The recording of this webinar will be shared through a follow-up email from the team from jobs.ac.uk, and will also be on the career advice section on the on the jobs.ac.uk website. If you'd like to recap or on anything of the topics saved or share it with your network, please visit jobs.ac.uk and follow on the social media. On behalf of jobs.ac.uk, it's a bit of a mouthful, I'd just like to thank our panellists, Andrew and Paula, for their time today, and thank you all for watching and giving up your time to come and listen. We would hope that you find the information shared helpful. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye, folks.